All right, we are live. What's up, folks? It is, October the 11th, 2023, and a little bit of state of the network action on a Wednesday morning. Looks like, let's see, first piece of news I got is that Foundation announced that they're going to be doing some stuff at the same time as this. There's a couple of Helium governance calls. There's, of course, the monthly community call. So we may move from Wednesdays at 9 a.m. What's up, Suburban? And we may not. I may just take a couple days off, and when they want to do their calls, let them do their calls. And when they don't have anything going on, we can do our thing. What's up, Keenan? Good to see you, dog. So I don't think there's anything big going on there as far as crazy Foundation stuff. Let's subtitle active, please, Jose. Huh. I'm sure there's a way to do that, Jose. I'm just not sure that it's frankly worth my time to figure it out. But yeah, I'll see if we can do some. I'm guessing you're asking for live subtitles. Okay, so that's Foundation. Let's see, Helium governance office hours were announced. That's cool. Foundation console crashed and restarted this week. So what's up, CF? So I think that's kind of standard stuff as we're working on all the kinks of the network. But that did bring in the next piece of news that I got, which is that 𝐃𝐞𝐏𝐈𝐍 got a ton of requests this week for people moving over with the news that the Foundation... Now, correct me if I'm wrong here. I don't think Foundation console is shutting down. I think it's the VIP console that's shutting down. And maybe Foundation console is shutting down at the end of the year. But either case... I know there's a bunch of folks that have reached out to me and said, hey, how do I use 𝐃𝐞𝐏𝐈𝐍? Can I use it? What's the cost of using it? All that stuff. So the answers are, yeah, you can use it. You can go to, console.𝐃𝐞𝐏𝐈𝐍.com. It's a permissionless thing. So you can sign up. You don't need to ask me like, hey, do you mind if I sign up? You can just sign up. The cost is 0.000130. What is that? $1,000th of a dollar? I always get that wrong. What's up, Jay? But whatever it is, it's 10x the cost of a normal DC. And that's it. You can use as much as you want. You can have as many devices as you want. You can blast through as much information as you want. What's up, Vision Grid? You can do whatever you want. It's a permissionless thing. That was the whole point, was to make it so you didn't have to ask me or anyone else. Pittsburgh, what's going on? So I think I must need to do a better job at messaging that out, because I've gotten a lot of questions like, hey, how do I sign up, and what are the costs and the pricing and the structure? And it's like, it's super, super simple. I think the only thing that might be complex there is... if you want to sign some like separate deal with me and you're going to do a ton of volume and you want to get the 0.00001, like the regular DC cost, but you pay me outside of that, we can do that. But that's so much ass pain. Yeah, just email me if that is really your thing. You might be better off going through Paul at Disc 91 there. But if you just want to support the kind of GK enterprise, that would be great. And we can totally do that. But that's the only kind of complicated way to do it, is you pay whatever. And I'm just making this up, $250 a month for access to it. And we just make your DC 0.001 or whatever, you can figure it out. If that's interesting to you, email me. Okay, next thing I got is, what's up, Bobby? Later today, Demo is doing a Twitter Spaces with 𝐶𝐲𝐶 from the Foundation. I want to say, is that, Keenan, is that 4 p.m. Eastern? What's up, Siegfried? Maybe it's 1. I don't know when it is, but it's sometime today. It'll be a Twitter space. You can find out all the details in the Helium Discord. And they're going to be talking about the new device, which is the Macaron. Not the macaroon and not the macaroni, but the Macaron. Max and I at DePIN State and Golden Hawks did an interview with Andy from Demo yesterday. I think we're dropping that tomorrow morning. So decide where you want to get your info. Maybe get it both places. Alex, 4 p.m. Eastern. Thanks, Keenan. Alex is super good. 𝐶𝐲𝐶 is obviously awesome. And then I think we did a pretty good job with the thing tomorrow. Although, if you want to laugh, watch me when I do the ad read. I fuck it up. Yeah, I need to get better at those things. But yeah, I think it's 15, 16 minutes. And Andy's always super cool to talk to. That one drops tomorrow. Or you can watch the Twitter Spaces with 𝐶𝐲𝐶 and Alex today on the Macaron, which is, I probably should have said what it was. I don't have one yet, but it's a tiny little device, plugs into your OBD2 port on your car, and gives you information about your car. The original AutoPi device that I've got, like and I'll get this wrong. There's like something called a decoder, and you need one for every type of car. And because I've got this car, they just didn't make a ton of. It's not a fancy car. It's a fucking Volkswagen e-Golf. They haven't made the decoder yet. So the demo device for me, for the car that we use most, is not super useful. But I might get the macaron for the truck. I got a 2004 Toyota Tacoma. And by God, if it doesn't work there, it won't work anywhere because there's probably more of those made than anything else. Yeah, let's see. And apparently Demo said they expect a couple of dollars monthly Helium IoT usage per device. So one of the cool things with the Demo thing is they prepaid for 3 years of device usage. And that's included in the cost. So the macaron, I probably should have put like some affiliate link or something, but I didn't. You can find Demo. I'm sure like, what is it? shop.demo.zone is probably it. So for the first 3 years, your costs are covered. And it's kind of a cool thing. Like I think Andy was saying in the interview we did that'll go drop tomorrow. The next closest thing competitively is like $100. So same price to start, but then they charge, I don't know, $80 a year. And Demo's not charging anything for the first 3 years. And maybe they won't charge anything forever. So yeah, super cool to see, in our world, these decentralized projects coming together and working together. And what I thought is that this may be this kind of harbinger of the long hardware cycle finally poking its little head up, right? Like, it's just like mushrooms. There's the mycelium that kind of grows underground for years and years and years. And then a rainstorm hits and all the mushrooms pop up and people are like, holy shit, look at all the mushrooms. It's like, no, they've been working the whole time. This is just a part of it that you see. And I think that we maybe see this as like the first thing that pops up that's a piece of hardware that's built specifically for some of these decentralized networks, in this case, obviously Demo and Helium. So Pittsburgh, I think I read the macaron is 2008 and newer only. Oh yeah, that was the other thing. I wonder if it is. I think they put that out as like a blanket statement just to cover it. So I mean, maybe I need to upgrade to a new truck. My wife Lee wants us to get, the fuck is that thing called, Lee? Some Polestar car. And she's like, if we sell the e-Golf, we can do the same, whatever. I'm just like, fuck it. The cars we have work. I'm not way into upgrading, but maybe it's a good thing. I guess this Magic Polestar car is made of, I don't know, environmentally friendly stuff. I can't see how that's more environmentally friendly than just not buying a car, but that's my hippie suspicions in there. Okay, so that's the macaron. Check out the Demo Spaces later today over on X or Twitter. I'm wondering if that thing will ever go back to, what's up, Zim? If Elon will just be like, fuck, I'll just call it Twitter. I don't think so, but make it a lot easier for a lot of us. Okay, we talked about Medeo Scientific getting lots of requests. There should be a link down in the description to Medeo Scientific, and if you can't find it, it's console.medeoscientific.com. There's actually a medeoscientific.com website. I mean, not actually, it's no surprise because I fucking built it. And it's got a little FAQ on it, but yeah, The Last of Us meets Helium. I don't know what that is. What's The Last of Us? Is that some like old school vehicle thing? Yeah, so you can find all the stuff you need to if you want to use Medeo Scientific. And then I think the last thing that I've got in my notes is I've heard people calling it Mateo Scientific, and it's Medeo. I mean, you can say it however you want. If you want to use it, you can call it fucking whatever you want at all. But I've been pronouncing it Medeo Scientific. So, and it came out of the original idea that is going to be the piece of the next thing we'll talk about, the next piece of news, which is I wanted and still want to and still will put up a ton of weather stations in this little valley. The Last of Us is a game. In this little valley that I fly paragliders in. And in this valley right now, there are 1, 2, 3 weather stations in the whole valley. I better figure out what the acreage is of it, because it's a pretty big thing. Let's call it a mile or two wide by a mile long. And maybe it's the other way around. Maybe it's 2 miles long and a mile wide. But it's big enough that 3 weather stations are not enough to cover the granularity that I want. So there's a weather station right now down in the bottom of the valley. There's a weather station up in the mountain. And then there's kind of a random weather station that's like halfway up on one side. But the idea that I had was this particular valley in San Diego is home to pretty much the most reliable mountain flying site in America. So if you're into paragliding, you've heard of this site. It's called Blossom. some of the most famous people in the paragliding world, which was this tiny little world, even smaller than Helium. About 5,000 paragliders in the U.S. Know about this place. So the thing that is unusual about it is that even when the conditions around the rest of the county, the rest of the area are bad, the conditions at Blossom are usually pretty good. And we think that's because of the way that the valley is set up and the way that it faces and the mouth of the valley and the sides are high enough and et cetera, et cetera. But we don't know for sure. So I'd almost always thought that Helium would be a super cool use case for it. But most weather stations are 300, bucks at a minimum. And remember the one that I won in Vegas at that CES thing? That thing was like a $1,800 weather station. And the one that I'd originally put up where 𝐾𝐞𝐬 𝐒𝐿 is, that was, I think we spent $1,400 on that, maybe $1,200. It wasn't cheap. So it was like, okay, I want to put these weather stations everywhere, but it's pretty expensive to do that. And so that was what kicked off this whole thing that led to Medio Scientific and led to this next piece, which is the Helium Bridge, which we put out technically the last video required by the grant from the Helium Foundation. So Helium Foundation gave us a grant to build this thing and to make it work and to make it so that the plans are stuff that you can find and you can build on your own. We dropped that video Monday, but what it is, it's a device that takes almost any radio protocol. And there's tons more radio protocols that aren't, let's call it, programmed yet. And I'll just use like the words that make sense to normal people. I'm sure some of you fucking nerds will have better words for it. Integration or something. So it takes any device that is wireless, whether that's a 433 RTL or eventually it'll be a Bluetooth or whatever, et cetera, and puts it onto the Helium network. Now, for some things, it doesn't matter. If you already have a cell connection, you already have a 4G connection, like for the original AutoPi, doesn't matter at all. It already has connection through cell. But for tons and tons and tons of sensors that are pretty cheap sensors, whether they're weather stations that, which is what this one is, I think it's $110 plus shipping for this weather station that we've been using, or it's a soil moisture sensor and those are, $40, or it's a temperature sensor, or what's the last one we did, Dirk? Air quality monitor. Like all of these things, if you want them to have long range capability, you either have to wait for the manufacturers to build in Helium, which they may or may not do. I mean, Demo did the macaron. Sorry, I haven't finished my coffee yet. But I think we'd be waiting a long time if we wait for the entire world to switch over to Helium. Or you can take this Helium Bridge, which basically listens on whatever the protocol is that device is using. So it could be a 433 RTL or 915 RTL or whatever, and puts it onto Helium. So that means that this weather station, that's $110 plus shipping, so it's $140, plus the Helium Bridge, which we're estimating the cost is about $60 plus or minus, depending on where you find shipping. If it's, you're doing crazy shipping, it's probably going to be $80 or $90. But let's call it 60, and that makes my math really easy because I'm adding 140 and 60, and that makes a weather station for $200, which is a pretty good deal. And then in some special cases, let's see, the weather stations are transmitting on, what is it? They're doing this FSK, frequency shift keying on some ISM band. I'm just like throwing words out there that I barely understand. But the upshot of it is that the weather station only transmits, we think, 100 meters maximum range, and probably more like 10 or 30 meters. So Siegfried, those meters are for you. For the rest of us, what's 10 meters? 30 some feet, 36 feet or 33 feet, whatever it is. But basically it's a short range. And so what you can do with this weather station is you turn it into a long range remote, place it anywhere weather station. And that works for soil moisture sensors, for all of the rest of the stuff that I listed. So it's kind of an exciting thing because it almost immediately unlocks at least 100 devices that are just using the 433 or the 915, what is it, RTL 433. And there's a whole list of those things. You can find that on the Helium Bridge GitHub, which, oh fuck, I didn't put that in the description, but it's in the video that we put. So you can use any of those devices and instantly extend their range from 10 meters to a couple kilometers, or if you got line of sight, maybe a little bit further. So that's pretty cool because it means that there's a couple hundred and probably a couple thousand devices that weren't able to connect to really anything beyond 10 meters away from them, which is fine if you're at home. I've got this little 3,000 square foot lot that I live in San Diego. The house is 1,100 square feet. It's kind of tiny, a normal size place. I could do Wi-Fi for everything in my house if I wanted to. Now, Wi-Fi has the power requirements that are a little bit higher. And maybe there's this stuff where I know on some of my IoT devices that are on Wi-Fi now, like they'll just, they fucking forget the password or something and they drop off, which doesn't usually happen with Helium. But if I'm moving out of my suburban environment, and really like the environment that I control, which is a pretty small little plot of land, and I want something that can extend out a ton of different sensors, that's where the Helium bridge starts to really, really shine. So super cool stuff. I could put a bridge. I mean, one thing I could do is I could put a bridge up on the roof, and it could listen for any devices that my neighbors have put in, whether that's a weather station or their soil moisture sensor, whatever it is that they're doing, and then rebroadcast that. Now that'd be more of like a fun, hey, can we do this neat nerd trick? But it starts to get pretty interesting if you say specifically for paragliding, but you can think of it for agriculture as well. Let's say you got a weather station up in the sky that's 30 feet up that's, listening, that's sensing the wind and the air temp and the rest of it. You can also have, because there is a limit, but there's not like a crazy limit. You could also have a sensor down on the ground measuring ground temp and soil moisture. And both of those sensors could be these off the shelf, pretty cheap sensors. Both of them could be sending to the Helium bridge, and that bridge could be rebroadcasting that stuff. And once you get into certainly in paragliding, because a lot of our spots are more kind of remote, but definitely in ag, a lot of these farms are in places where they don't have cell coverage. And so all of a sudden now you've got wireless coverage. So kind of cool. I'm certainly excited about it. And then the other piece of news there is that yesterday at midnight, East Coast, was the last day to submit this SBIR grant. What is it? Small Business Innovation Research. It's some government grant thing. And we put in a grant for the Helium bridge to kind of continue the development of it, and then to actually use the data visualization piece that is enabled once you can get a couple hundred or 1,000 sensors, whether that's in, the paragliding valley or that's in a urban environment and you're looking for, air pollution in the Z-axis. So up and down, is it bad at 10 feet? Is it worse at 20 feet? Is it better at 30 feet, et cetera, et cetera? All that stuff kind of gets enabled by this. So that's what's going on in my world. That's the news I got. Let's see. I stopped on that. So you guys are still on Last of Us in the macro. Yeah, I think CF, and I forget who that is. I forget if that's Tommy or if that's someone else. I'm sorry. I never put together the names on YouTube with the people I know in real life. Is that the Macaron is OBD2, so it should work on all these cars. Like, they're not saying it absolutely won't work. Demo's not saying it absolutely won't work on cars before 2008. I think what they're saying is, like, we don't guarantee that it works. And that from what I've seen of the kind of DIY car diagnostics crowd, is that it will start working as soon as one of these nerds also has a 2004 Toyota Tacoma, and they publish whatever the decoder, translator, whatever it is, integrator. There's some word that I'm missing that it is, and then all of a sudden it'll work, and I can see what's going on with my badass old truck that's driven all over the western United States. So cool. I think that's the news that I got. That's most of the news that was in Helium, at least as far as I could find. Is there anything else that you guys want to talk about? And I'll take the chance to take a sip of coffee. Which is, I think, I've talked with, I don't know if Dave Akers is on here. He hasn't been on in a while. Remember, he got his, so Dave Akers ran Helium Analytics back when we had just the Helium blockchain. Super useful site for seeing what was going on. In fact, there is a article that Max and I are publishing tomorrow over on goldandhawks.com, which is the Goldhawks website. So goldandhawks.com, that talks about token incentives. I don't know if I could pull it up on the screen here. It might be, it might piss some of you guys off, but it was basically, we talked about what drives miner deployment and how it's ROI, that what is commonly called ROI, that's actually called payback period, that drives miner deployment. And not just in Helium. We used Helium because it's the biggest data set, but it's still, if you think about it, it's just 15 or 16, I think it's 1,500 days, maybe just over 1,500 days right now for Helium. Because it started, was it July 29th, 2019? HM is now available in Broward and West Palm Beach. Oh, Helium Mobile. Yeah, totally. We should talk about Helium Mobile. Where was I? I was going with something with David Analytics. I don't know. He got part of his guts cut out because he had was it colon cancer. And last I talked to him, he's doing okay. Fuck, I don't know where I was going with the Helium analytics stuff, but we can talk about Helium Mobile. I should have put some links in there. I'm seeing those guys doing a full court press on, at least on Twitter, which is like the social media thing that I spend most of my time. Although I keep getting told I should do stuff on TikTok. And you can pay for, thank you, Jay. You can pay for the Helium Mobile plan with mobile tokens. That's live. I saw yesterday in one of the Telegram groups that someone had a problem with that, which I expect at the beginning. There's always a couple problems, but I'm guessing that that's either fixed or that will be fixed. Probably end of day. The way that team works, they work super fast. So, and then the other thing that, geez, I'm going to just put my ignorance on stunning display here, is I think you can get a Helium Mobile. You can get a Helium Mobile plan, and it'll work outside of Miami. But they were focusing on Miami, like that's where the first big push was. But I haven't paid enough attention in the Telegram on what's going on there to see what's up with that. So, yeah. Super cool stuff. We got to talk about the Wi-Fi. Maybe we'll see if we can get either Boris on here, or probably better is just put him on like a separate DePIN State interview with just him, just with a kind of DePIN State interview. There's a couple other interviews coming down the pipe that we're doing. There's a project called Pinomo, and I want to say we're doing one with them later in the month. That'll be pretty cool to check out. Penomo. And then, geez, I should look at my calendar to see what else is up. I know we're doing one with Ariel at HiveMapper, I think end of the month as well. And just checking in. Silencio, I think, is early November. Doing some talks with, or doing a conversation with them, or a DePIN State interview with them. So what Max and I noticed that was kind of interesting is that it was like mid-August until maybe a week ago, maybe less, was like mega building phase for a lot of these projects. And I would hit them every 2 weeks and be like, hey, do you want, like, what's going on? You want to come on DePIN State? We can talk about what's going on. And sometimes they wouldn't answer. Most of the times they answered. And sometimes they'd just be like, dude, we're heads down, busy building. We'll have something in November. So, yeah, I think it's cool. And we'll start to see we'll certainly start to see DePIN State episodes drop more frequently. There's about a month that we basically took off because it's like nobody wants to talk about anything. And then there was other stuff we're doing. Silencio Bruno. What's going on, Sim? Siegfried. So they completely opened the 2 neighboring counties in north of Miami-Dade. If you're a subscriber, your phone works nationwide. Okay, that's I was kind of close. So if you get to be a subscriber somehow, and I think I should have been, but when I first signed up, like when Max and I flew out for that Miami thing, was it in the spring? I signed up with Nick at 𝗪𝐿, and I didn't sign up with like my Apple email, and so I never got the thing to whatever get my phone on it. So. Yeah, never messed with it. Okay, and the Helium Mobile Nova accepting mobile as payments is there's no payment processing fees. Oh, no shit, that's big. Huh. I wonder if I should start taking payment at Paleo Treats in Helium Mobile. Probably not, but the payment processing fees are no joke. They're usually was like 30 cents or I'll say this, and then 30 people will reach out and be like, hey, I've got a special deal for you on the payment processing fees. But there's something like 30 cents or 1 cent or 2 cents or whatever it is, plus a percentage of the transaction that's like 0.87% or something. So it adds up if you're doing a lot of business. Only open to the public to subscribe in these 3 counties. Okay, so if you have an address in whatever the Miami area, you can subscribe and figure it out, and then it'll work nationwide. But that seems like kind of a pain in the ass workaround, and I'll just wait until they make it nationwide and then do it then. So I don't know about you guys. I've been getting a couple texts about your Gemini earn balance on SMS, and I would just want to say that's probably a fucking scam. So don't fall for scams. That's what Solana Pay is for, USDC. Maybe we'll do some Solana Pay stuff at Paleo Treats. We've been cranking lately in the shop with the dessert, so this is kind of totally separate business. And we've got one customer, maybe there's 2. One of them pays with Bitcoin, one of them pays with Ethereum, and they come in every month or 2. And it's always like pain in the ass to find like the QR code that they can pay with, because none of us are really used to taking payment. But I think we had someone buy, I don't know, like a $90 box of Paleo Treats with Bitcoin or Ethereum years and years ago. It's like those end up being the most expensive desserts ever bought. And it was a buddy of mine, so we kind of laugh about it. It's the same thing. When I first got into paragliding, I paid for my wing in Ethereum, and I think I paid 42 ETH for the wing, which at the time was worth $500, and that's not worth $500 now. So it turns out that's probably the most expensive paragliding wing ever sold. So 42, I think it was 42 ETH. Yeah, we remember the lady I bought it from, and I laugh about it. It's like, that was a pretty pricey one. So, what else is going on? I'm trying to think of what I'm seeing on a couple of the different Discords I'm in. I think we're just in this building phase. And a lot of folks are heads down. I got a call after this to talk with a guy about the Helium bridge and how that gets how that gets used and how that starts to get monetized. Zim, did you save the crypto payments? Yeah, I think we still have like a Paleo Treats Coinbase, and that's where they go, and I just haven't touched that. So yeah, sounds like the Bitcoin story. The guy bought a pizza for 10,000 Bitcoin. I saw through a Twitter ad yesterday an interview with a dude called Gummo, G-U-M-M-O. And I bet if you look for hacker interview Gummo, you'll see this thing. It's just this really plain interview, like a head on the camera, dark sheet behind him, pretty well lit. And it's this guy's story who was started off as a bad hacker and then ended up, because he was good enough, getting found by the government, the usual thing. Like they're like, hey, you want to go to jail? You want to work for us? And he's like, cool, I'll work for you guys. And then he set up a fiber link between the Chicago Stock Exchange and the New York Stock Exchange that I think is still in use today, is what he's saying, at least at the time of the interview. And he's like, his story is just, it's super cool. Like these hacker stories who are super nerds and super good, they seem to tend to follow the same thing. Is like their kids, they're fucking around. They find something that none of the adults understand, but kind of rules the adults' worlds. They have fun with it. Then they realize they can make money with it. Then they're kids, so they're dumb, so they get caught making money with it. And then they do this thing where it's like, go to jail or work for us. And they work for the government. And then, through whatever those contacts are, businesses find out about them. And they're like, hey, can we use your, what's the Liam Neeson, I have a special set of skills, or whatever his movie quote is. And they get picked up and they go work for a bunch of other folks and kind of end up with a decent job and a career. But interestingly, in this guy's story, in Gummo's story, he was working, he says he's got this quote somewhere in the story that is certainly the opposite of me. He's like, there is a part of my character that is completed by having a 9-to-5 job. It's something like that. And so at one point he's working for this guy in Chicago, and Gummo finds out about Bitcoin, and he's like, hey, this thing's kind of cool. And he's telling his boss about it. And his boss is like, oh, what would it take to set up a Bitcoin miner? And I forget when this was, but you'll figure it out in a second, because I'll give you some numbers. And Gummo says, oh, it'll be about $1 million. And the guy like pulls open this filing cabinet drawer, and there's $1 million there. He's like, all right, cool. Like, just build it. And I guess Gummo's doing a bunch of big money stuff. So $1 million was a lot, but not like crazy. So he builds a supercomputer to mine Bitcoin. And in something like a couple months, he mines 5,000 Bitcoin. And his boss is like, okay, that's cool. And they keep going, and he ends up mining 80,000 Bitcoin. I don't know how much of it he sold, but I don't think he sold much of it, because in another interview, he says something like, I've got about $6 billion worth of Bitcoin. And he didn't say it like I would say, like, billion or trillion or whatever. Like it was an actual fact of numbers. And he's like, but what I really like is I really like working a 9-to-5 job. So I still work a 9-to-5 job, which is crazy, right? For most of us, is like, that's the dream, is to have a ton of money and not have to work to 9-to-5. But when you think about it, and certainly this has held true in my life when I've had kind of my ups and downs in income, is when you make a ton of money, it's fun for like a week, maybe two. And then for me, and certainly for my wife, like our little family unit, we get bored. In 2009, we went bankrupt. The two companies we had, we didn't manage them well, the economy, whatever excuses you want to make, we fucked up. And when you do that, when you go through that bankruptcy thing, it's really interesting, because on, up to this one date, all of your, the creditors are coming after you because you owe them money. And we, like I said, we made stupid decisions that intersected with bad luck and then lost pretty much everything. But it goes to this point where you're getting all these phone calls and people are calling you every day like, hey, when are you going to pay this? You got this bill due, you got that bill due. And you're just like, fuck, how am I going to do this? And eventually you declare, well, one of the options is to declare bankruptcy. I guess you could shoot yourself in the fucking head, but we didn't do that. And then all of a sudden, like, all the noise stops and nobody can call you. And then you see this path forward to figure it out. And because of the time I had a regular 9-to-5 job, all of the income I was making, which is like 80 grand a year, like a regular job, had been going to trying to pay all these bills and like robbing Peter to pay Paul. And all of a sudden, because when you declare bankruptcy, all that stuff gets put on hold for a while. And this is back in 2009. So we're now talking a while ago. All that stuff gets put on hold, and it's like the biggest pressure is lifted off of you. And so we had this moment where we were super stressed and we thought we're fucked. And then all that pressure's lifted, and it's like, oh, you have a normal life with basically no bills until you figure it out. And the option we chose for bankruptcy, there's two types, is Chapter 7 or Chapter 13. Chapter 7, you lose absolutely everything, including your house, everything you have. It gets all stripped, but everything gets knocked away right away. Or you can decide and negotiate with the judge to pay back a portion of it. I think it's Chapter 13, and it takes 5 or 7 years to pay that back, and you get to keep your house. So we decided that keeping our house was important, and that we would pay back some percentage of the stuff we owed over the next 5 years, which we did. Bankruptcy was cleared. But the point of the story was that there was this piece where for like 2 weeks we had income coming in, and it was all of a sudden we were like back in this dream. And we knew that eventually we'd have to kind of figure it out, but we had nothing to do. And at the end of those 2 weeks, we started another 2 companies, one of which is Paleo Treats, which is still running today. The other is an ATM company that we started that we ran profitably for a couple of years and then sold. Like, there's this thing where you think you want a lot of money and a lot of free time to do nothing. But if you're someone who wants to like make the world a better place, that turns out to be like a pretty terrible combo, is that you need something to do. So maybe for me, it's not a 9-to-5, or for you, it's not a 9-to-5. But there, like, even if we won this with this stupid Powerball up at $700 million, even if we win that, my guess is that after whatever, a week, and maybe it's a year, because that's a lot of money and I don't want to think about that much money like I've experienced that. But I'm sure after some fairly short amount of time, it'll be like, all right, what are we going to do? Because I'm not going to sit around on a fucking beach in a chair just drinking booze. That's not the game. Yeah. Siegfried, the dream of building or working on something that is meaningful and one's own choosing. Yeah, I think that is the dream, is to kind of build something rad and to do that. And I guess, one of the outcomes of that whole piece is it eventually led me in this fairly winding way to where we are now, where I got to build up this Gristle King thing and this DePIN State thing and have this Golden Hawks thing with Max, and all of that came from all these twists and turns that were unexpected and oftentimes super unpleasant. And that's, we're kind of going way off track here from State of the Network, but I think it's a cool message, is that when you go through these times that appear to be super unpleasant, is that it's just like a shift in what you're doing. And it can be really helpful to think of it, instead of like just a shitty time, is like, oh, I'm just making a change. Humans generally don't like change. And what's going to happen is that my blinders are going to go from here, where I kind of know what's going on straight in front of me, and they're just shifting and going over here. And so all of a sudden there's a hand in front of your face and you can't see anything, but it just means you need to turn your head to look at this new thing. And then that thing is the new path that you go down. And that has certainly happened for me enough times for me to know, like, that's a pattern that goes on. So, no, my first thumbs down on this one. Well, I don't know what the thumbs down is for, but fucking A, there it is. Maybe you don't like the perspective thing. Maybe you want, I don't know. Maybe you just hit the thumbs down button by accident. I always get so reactive on these things, but you expect people to sometimes, I try and think of people as doing always the best thing, but sometimes the human reaction is one of fear, and you kind of protect yourself against the worst. So, yeah. That's it. I think that's probably most of what I got today. I'm not sure what else is going on in Helium that you guys want to talk about. If there's anything you want to hit, let me know. Yeah, Zim the pivot. The pivot. It's always a pivot. We can hit that. Otherwise, we can wrap this thing up early and go get shit done. I think it's funny because yesterday was like the final moments of submitting this SBIR grant. It was, batshit crazy right down to the wire. I think we submitted it with 45 minutes to go. And, after like months and months of working on the thing. And then all of a sudden, again, it was like this giant pressure's off. It's like, all right, what are we going to do next? And I think one of the cool things to do next is like, maybe these SBIR grants are a cool way to go. And you figure out how the U.S. government wants to support you contributing something new to the world through this small business innovation and research method. And maybe that's a cool way to go. Any chance you can schedule someone soon from the company to talk about the Macron launch, November 2023? Yeah, so there should be one coming out tomorrow. We did an interview with Andy at Demo yesterday, CF, and that drops tomorrow morning along with this blog post on incentives. So two kind of separate things. Anything meaningful to say on Wi-Fi DABA? I think they're going to be really good. Max and I are certainly talking to them, so I feel like they're talking to the right experts. Obviously, I'm biased, but yeah, I think it's going to end up being cool. So, but like nothing meaningful right now. I think what will happen, ideally with them is we get to work with them and we get to take all the experience that we pulled out of working with Helium and doing all that stuff and apply it to them and make it a much better thing. Anything good coming out of LoRaWAN Live? I think, Jay, that Siegfried, you're confused by them. Yeah, I think it's a confusing thing. All right, so the LoRaWAN Live, Jay, Joey and I were thinking about doing a live show, but he's in Tokyo. I don't know what time it is in Tokyo, but it's certainly not 9:30 in the morning. So we just missed connecting our wires there. I haven't heard anything big yet, but I would talk to Joey yesterday for something else. So yeah, I think nothing like super cool that I've seen, but that's just because I haven't seen it. I know the last time I went to that LoRaWAN event, the one in Barcelona, it was like, dude, there's a lot of rad stuff going on. Siegfried, I'm super confused by Wi-Fi DABA. Yeah, I think, and you don't understand what they want, with or without Helium. Yeah, I think that's kind of to be expected. Is that, you look at these things and you say, okay, well, how do you fit in? What's the part you're going to play? How do you contribute? How do you get rewarded? How do you get compensated in some way? How do we make these two things come together and make something bigger? And I don't think right now that is super clear. And I guess that brings up another point to talk about, which is that Max and I have been talking a lot about, and I've been doing more researching about governance lately. And we talked a little bit about governance last time. I think last time we had a DePIN State. But there's these competing things of decentralization, which sounds like a really good idea because you don't want to concentrate power. But then if it's too decentralized, it's difficult to manage and you don't get anything done. And so the position that I've taken as I'm talking to these academics and experts is, and I think this is a position that most of them kind of get and they're excited about, is like, look, with these new communities of whether it's Helium or Demo or HiveMap or WeatherXM or whatever. And I think WeatherXM's got some super cool stuff coming down the pipe, and I'll probably be working with them pretty soon, but no official news yet, is that they're all communities that have these new elements that are the intersection of a couple things that enable them to basically act as governance, I don't want to say experiments, but governance explorations, right? Until now, there's been no way to test governance theories in the real world, right? You've got these theories, you got this math, it adds up. If you look at traditional economics, like the math that they had, it matched the real world, but that's because they matched it to the real world. It wasn't like it was a separate piece. And so now there's this, complex adaptive systems, which is relatively new economic theory and market theory, with interactors and agents and blah, 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 all of that stuff. So where I think that is going is that, let's say with Helium, you've got, 350-ish thousand hotspots online right now. So less than that in terms of people, probably a lot less than that. As the last time I checked, there are about 14,000 staked positions. So that means there are 14,000 or less people willing to vote in Helium. So that's kind of a nice thinning out of the number of people to vote. That's still a good number of people, 14,000 or less. And I know that, you guys know this if you watched it, when the staking thing first came out, I staked, 7 7 positions or 12 or something. And some of it was testing. So it's like a 1 HNT stake or one, whatever it was, stake. So you can, let's just say we can safely divide that 14,000 by, I don't know, 3 or 2. 2 is probably easier because it's 7, and 4 would be easier because it'd be 3,500. But there's still a couple thousand people who are willing to vote. So you say, okay, how do you make it so that you've got that number of stake positions representing some number of tokens? And I think it was just 22% of tokens have been staked. So a fifth of the network has decided it's worth their while to vote. There's a bunch of questions there. And Siegfried, I'm seeing, that not every project needs to be fully decentralized. I think what we're seeing here is this opportunity to explore decentralized government in the real world, right? Up until now, no one is going to be like, hey, and I think I said this last time, the US is going to be like, hey, we're really interested in this governance thing, and we are going to give you the state of Arkansas to like test out your governance ideas on. So whatever you want to do, we're just going to go ahead and enact it for Arkansas. It's it's a piece of land. You guys can have it. Like, that's never going to happen. That's never going to happen with any country in the world. It's certainly not going to happen, even in countries where it's clearly like their system is broken. So there's that kind of opens up the line of inquiry for this thing, which is like in Helium, they're looking for governance. I mean, for Christ's sake, they're having governance working hours. They're open, office hours, where it's like, hey, we've done an okay job so far. It's good enough. It's working. We think it can be better. How are we going to figure this stuff out? And so from my side, the business side is like, okay, how are you going to pay people to figure things out? Because we don't want to do things for free. I don't think that's good in the long term. And then how are you going to make it so that people are willing to be compensated long term, and so that the governance model is sustainable and decentralized? And to me, I mean, in my life, there's like these, it's always like 30 projects, but there's a couple projects that are really cool. And that is one of them. Is maybe I can be a part of figuring out how you make government decentralized and sustainable and better than the government that we currently have. Because one thing that, it's like, what's the classic quote is, it's like American democracy is the worst form of government except for every other government in existence. So it's like, we know we can do better. And whether you agree with that, like there's no country that everybody looks at and is like, oh yeah, that's got the best government, so we all agree, and they're crushing, right? It's not like there's a thing like a physical wheel, right? Where there's like 30 different types of wheels. Some of them are octagons, some of them are square, some of them are triangles. And it's really clear that a round wheel is the wheel that you want to put on your car. It's not that clear. It's just like, well, the octagon is good for this, and that wheel's got spikes, and nobody has a great idea of what's going on in this kind of decentralized governance thing. So I think, and I'm super excited to explore and continue exploring what's going on in this world. And I think this could be really, really cool. Now, I'll tell you frankly, I don't yet see a way to extract value from it. So it's like this thing where I got to be really careful of putting myself in the spot where I do a ton of thinking, a ton of work, and figuring all these things out, and then contribute something rad to the world. And then when my mortgage payment comes due, I'm like, well, hey, I helped with that rad governance thing. And they're like, great, fucking pay me the money. So I think that's like an interesting piece, is how do you make sure that everybody gets compensated for the work they do? And that's certainly not something we've figured out in these worlds, right? In these decentralized worlds. So right now there are grants programs, and the grants programs are pretty good, but it's a one-time grant, right? So you can't expect that to be sustainable. By definition, it's not. And there is not yet a carve-out for... Bobby, we did talk about Helium mobile allowing mobile payments. Jay talked about it earlier. There's not yet a carve-out for governance, as far as I can tell. And there should be. So every DePIN project, and Max will get, he'd be like, what the fuck are you doing talking about numbers? But every DePIN project, let's just say there is a set amount of tokens from that project that should go to the miners. And it should be the majority of the tokens, right? Because the miners are the one building the network. Let's say it's 75%. Could be it's 80. It could be the bottom number is 72.927 repeating. Who fucking knows? But there's a set number of tokens that need to go to the miners. Okay, so that gives you a set number of tokens that don't go to the miners. Where do those go? In some cases, like in Helium, there was HST, there's Helium security tokens. I think Pittsburgh was way back in the beginning. But yeah, Helium Mobile is allowing mobile payments, and we talked about that. Not requiring payment processing fees, which got me on the Stripe thing, which got me on the whole thing. So to go back to governance, so it means that there's got to be this carve out for governance where it's like, this is, as these tokens emitted, a portion of these tokens go to making sure that we have good governance. Now that opens a whole new set of problems. Was like, what is good governance? Is it governance only by the educated? Is it, one miner, one vote, which is stupid? One token, one vote, which I think is stupid. I think it's like you got to be careful saying that, because someone will fucking quote me like, 𝗪𝗁 said this. But look, if we have one token, one vote, maybe all of us knows that there are whales in the system. There are people who have an enormous amount of tokens, and those people, hopefully, they're good. Sometimes they don't give a fuck. They've just amassed tokens super early on. They're not the founders. They just happen to be early. There's some random person in Austin who's like, oh yeah, cool, I'll buy a hotspot in fall of 2019. Yeah, fuck it, put that up, whatever. And then they see it, they're like, oh, it's worth a ton of money. That person has enough tokens to single-handedly change the course of what Helium does if they decide to lock up their tokens and vote. That's a stupid system. So we can't have that. So we can't have one token, one vote. Direct democracy always sounds good, but for groups of more than whatever it is, like some small amount, it doesn't work, or it's not fair to everyone. And we want to make sure that there's a minority of people that are allowed to have their say, and then don't get completely squashed and run over. And direct democracy doesn't allow that, because as soon as you have 51%, it's like, well, I'm just going to get rid of all of you other people I don't like, and that obviously leads to super bad outcomes. So then there's representative democracy, which is kind of cool. And I think Siegfried had talked about what was it? Open corporation, semi-decentralized. I mean, this is where it starts to get into the weeds. And there is some academic talk about this. So you got to be careful with involving academics, because they're super smart and they've studied this their whole lives. But, it's not like they're perfect oracles of exactly how to do things. And you only have to go back to, what was it? Was it McCarthy? McCarthy's whiz kids that just fucked up Chile and Venezuela and a bunch of other places by going in and saying like, hey, we're American academics, we got a bunch of money, we're gonna make you guys the best government ever. And they didn't. And now those countries have some pretty serious problems. So it's got to be something. It sucks that his risk goes unrewarded, though, in the example. Yeah, and I think it won't get unrewarded if we figure it out. And so someone, and that's going to certainly be me, and hopefully it's other people competing or cooperating with me, whatever it is, but we kind of are arriving at this destination, is going to have to take this leap of faith and say, fuck it. I trust that, however hippie you want to go, I'll just say I trust in the universe that if I do good things and I do the best I can and I come up with something valuable, that valuable thing will be rewarded. And I'm fine not knowing at the start how that thing gets rewarded. That's me. Other people can do it different ways, and everybody kind of gets the way that they do it. Bicameral governance, there's a bunch of different options. Please show what your shirt says. It says Climax. And it's got a bunch of little spray painted things on there. And that is a totally separate project that I've talked about in the 𝗪𝗁 crew. It takes like 15 minutes to go through what that project was. But yeah, it was a fun thing. Yeah, and there's, as Siegfried said, there's a ton to be said about governance. We're not going to figure out in the YouTube channel comments, that's for sure. Yeah, it's super complex, and there is a ton of nuance needed. But just know that, and who cares where he comes from, Bobby? Like, it's, I'm not sure which way you're saying that. He's definitely super smart, but it's like, who gives a fuck where people come from? Like, what I want to know is, are their ideas good? And so far, Siegfried's ideas have been super good. Jay's ideas have been good. Like everybody on here has something to contribute. And this is part of governance, is if you could measure out, if you could have one way to measure it, and I don't think this exists, where you'd say, how do I value this idea? And the better the more informed the idea is, the more weight it should have in the discussion, is one way to do it. But then that's like an impossible measure, because there's one thing where it's like, all right, the idea is super informed, but maybe there's some incentive behind it that is ill-formed, or even though it is really well informed, it's not informed enough to make the correct decision. Like, there's not enough information in even the smartest person in the world. So if you look at, the shirt versus Max. No, the shirt predates my my collaboration with Max. I got 2 boxes left of these shirts, and maybe we'll do like a separate show on Climax, the story behind Climax, because it's funny. So there's like all these ways of doing this. and we don't know like the best way to do it. So, I mean, I'm talking to folks right now. Max and I have a call scheduled next week with a guy who spent his whole life looking at governance. He's an Ivy League professor. He's built governance structures and had impact on U.S. governance that is tremendous. And as we talk with this whole thing with him, he's excited, but it's not like, oh yeah, well the solution for that is on like page 297 of this textbook. It's, you know, the right now the answer is like, hey, we need to ask more questions. Like I need to understand more of this. Each one of these things is going to need its own kind of custom piece, at least at the beginning, to figure out what's going on. So let's see. Bobby, you've asked about HiveMapper. Bobby, I got to give it to you. You don't quit on stuff. Can you talk about HiveMapper? Yeah, I mean, Ariel's coming on early November, late October. I think he booked the other day. I saw his date, and I forget which one it was. We can talk about it then with him. But you love the project, but they don't care about crypto. I don't think they don't care about tokenomics. They may not care as much as you care. They may care in a different way. And I mean, this goes back to the conversation we're having, Bobby, is how do we decide a dispute? And we can take this as an example in the last 10 minutes. How do we decide a dispute between Bobby and the HiveMapper project, right? Let's say that Bobby has a really good idea that the HiveMapper project should do is how do we, adjudicate that dispute? And how does it happen? How does his great idea on whatever it is get up through the HiveMapper group and they look at it not only as a single person leading it, the CEO, but also as a community and say, hey, this is a cool idea. We think maybe it could be tweaked in this way to make it a better idea. And then we want to vote on that idea to make sure everybody's on board with bringing this idea and making a change, whether it's substantial or minor, to the network. And that sounds kind of really easy in theory, but as you start getting into the weeds, it becomes pretty darn difficult. What school is he from? I'm not going to announce it yet, Bobby, just because the academics are they're pretty careful, and this guy is well known enough that I want to make sure he's okay with a public announcement that he's working with Golden Hawks. And he's been super cool so far. And I know I've got a little bit of experience with academics, like them publishing papers is really important to them being kind of, I'll say tainted by their connections is really important to them. And I want to make sure that he's cool with saying like, hey, I'm working with these crypto folks. So yeah, you've got this information. It's an Ivy League school and it's a dude. And I'm really, really excited. He's a super, super sharp guy to be working with him. But I'll figure it out. No, like a fist fight on DePIN is a stupid idea. And I think we want to be really careful with these things because I know you said that as a joke, and God knows I've loved violence to settle things in the past, especially as a younger dude. But look, clearly violence is not the way to settle these things. And it's got to be a way that is replicable across the entire ecosystem. So there's got to be a way that for a decentralized governance piece, there is some new way to think about it that applies to Helium, that applies to HiveMapper, that applies to Demo, that applies to WeatherXM, that applies to all the ones down the line, to Panomo, to, you name your project. There's some fundamental piece of decentralized governance that needs to, or that will probably fit into them. And then each one of those says, well, actually, we do things this way, so we're going to make this tweak here. And that tweak could be, kind of meaningless as far as the grand scheme of things. Like it's good for their project, but it has no negative impact. And it could be like it's an accidental tweak, like the gene that, takes you from being a living human being to, a fucking stillborn. And so, we want to figure that stuff out and make sure that all of these projects, which I think here, if we zoom way out and we look at a market or the economy as evolution, not like evolution, but as an actual evolutionary process, is that it seems pretty likely that these decentralized projects are, or it seems reasonable, maybe not likely, that these, WeatherXM has not gone straight to hell. They're going to be awesome. It seems that these projects are potentially the new evolved way of doing business. Now, they're clearly not there yet. So you got to be careful about taking that and saying like, oh yeah, they're definitely the next best thing. They could be screwed up and I said it's reasonable. I didn't say it's guaranteed. But it could be that they're the next evolutionary step in how organizations are run. And I would hope that we could look at this thing and say, all right, well, this is a digital digital age. And so it opens up this way for all of us on this call to kind of figure this out. Siegfried, Political Science, does a lot of research on governance that can inform crypto governance. Yeah, they do. I'm talking to a couple of those folks, and I kind of spent the last couple of weeks reaching out to people about this. There's a guy called, you can find this guy, he's totally public, Andy Hall, and he's up at A16Z, and he's published a couple pieces with another dude from Princeton named Porter. They've talked a little bit about governance. I think when they were looking at it, they were looking more at the NFT communities. I don't think they were looking at DePIN. I'm aiming to get connected with Andy because I want to talk to him more about this stuff. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing that's super cool is that, like, to circle back to the original thing, is these DePIN groups offer a new way to experiment with governance, ideally for the better. And hopefully, certainly in my perfect dream world, is we figure out something in DePIN that's this tiny little, like, right now, corner of the universe of human endeavor. And it's such a good idea that it spreads out to other governments everywhere, and it makes the world overall a much better place. That would be like, dream state for me. But you don't get there unless you experiment with it, and part of experimentation is failure and mistakes. So I can expect along the way that we'll screw something up, and kind of hope that it's not screwed up so badly that it hurts people, and that eventually, on balance, we get somewhere that is much, much better. So Pittsburgh, just ordered your macaron. Cool, super cool. I should have figured out something where it's like, yeah, I heard about this on DePIN State, but I didn't. You can tell them in the notes if you want to or not. Nick, what project are you most involved with right now? There's a couple of them, Bobby, and maybe we talk about that on another show. Because there are a couple talks that are in the works right now that I just, for fairly obvious business reasons, don't want to announce. But yeah, there's a bunch of projects out there that are super cool, and there's projects out there that are not. So try to work with the projects that are rad or have the potential to be rad, and try to avoid the projects that suck or have the potential to rug. So I think that's the goal, is always make things better. Fucking hey, guys. We got through another hour. I will see you guys next week, unless there is a Helium community governance open hours call or whatever. I think the Helium community call, if it's not next week, it'll be the week after. And when they have the community calls, we're not doing state of the network. I'm not sure what we'll do with the governance office hours, if we'll run at the same time, or if we'll shift, or if we'll just say, like, hey, the people who are interested in their governance stuff maybe not be interested in here, or maybe we just have them on DePIN State and we run the whole thing on one place. So that's it. Can you rate your predicts first to last? No. Thanks for asking. All right, that's a great unknown. Super good to see you guys. I will see all of you and girls. I will see all of you guys and girls hopefully next week on DePIN State. Rock and roll, and I think I'm out. Lates.